Now it is time to hook you up to the dipod.
Hey guys, RanterInShades here, exercise my first amendment rights vlog style, and it's time for another episode of What's Wrong With. An actual one this time, not a dumb April Fool's video.
What's wrong with me? You wanna know what's wrong with me? I can ask you the exact same thing. What's wrong with me?
One of the first bands I talked about in the What's Wrong With series was Metallica. Given how they're the most famous metal band of all time, I really don't think an argument can be made for any other band no matter how much you want it. For as much as I don't look back on my 2013 content with much fondness, a video for the series on Metallica was pretty much inevitable right out the gate with how contentious they are as the most famous metal band. Metallica are also part of what is known as the Big Four of thrash metal, the bands that were the most popular in that scene and carried the most weight in driving the rift in metal that ultimately pushed it forward as a genre, lest it wanted to sound like Quiet Riot or Saxon forever. Also included in this Big Four are Slayer, Anthrax, and the subject of today's video, Megadeth, the band that's the second most popular of the four. I doubt this is a popular opinion, but Megadeth is actually my favorite of the Big Four, and dare I say, right up with Havoc for being my favorite thrash metal band. They're the band I've listened to the longest of the four, and not to slight any of the other three, but some of the albums they've released are albums I consider favorites. Like a number of bands I'm into, Megadeth is yet another band I have Guitar Hero to thank for exposing me to them. They had Symphony of Destruction in Guitar Hero 1, and I consider it to be my favorite song in the game, if not second to Texas Flood by Stevie Ray Vaughan. For as simple as that main riff is, it sounded so badass to my 12-year-old self. And it really did a number in influencing my growing interest in metal. Plus there's that wicked solo from Marty Friedman that was the icing on the cake. They also had Hangar 18 in Guitar Hero 2, and it was there that I realized Megadeth was going to be a really special band to me. It wasn't as catchy as Symphony of Destruction, but the parts to this song blew me away. One memory I'll always have is of my first time playing career mode on Expert and having the hardest time getting through the blazingly fast solo trade-off in the latter half of the song. It got to a point where I literally yelled out loud, "Why the fuck is Marty Friedman so fucking good?" And this is what influenced me to look more into Megadeth. For as frustrated as I was at how difficult Hangar 18 was to play in the game, the guitar work was really insane, and I figured it must speak for something. Since then, Rust in Peace has become one of my favorite albums of all time, and my favorite album of 1990. It is a certified masterpiece. In addition to Hangar 18 ripping so much, you also have Tornado of Souls, which is known for having a guitar solo that's widely considered to be one of the most challenging ever.
In this solo, he starts it off easy, but then consistently moves it up further and further, until your fingers are like stretching from this fret into like next week.
As well as Holy Wars, Take No Prisoners, Poison Was the Cure, and my favorite song of Megadeth's, the title track. Why is this my favorite? Well, it has my all-time favorite drum intro. A great intro riff. A catchy shuffle feel verse riff with some dissonance to it. And a fast and energetic bridge. Basically, in addition to having consistently ear-catching riffs, it showcases the strengths of everyone in the band. One of the first concerts I went to was actually the co-headlining tour of Megadeth and Slayer in 2010. They were both touring for the 20-year anniversary of Rust in Peace and Seasons in the Abyss, respectively, and they played both albums front to back. Testament was also opening on this tour, and weirdly enough, they also had an album turning 20 at the time, Souls of Black. I was obviously going to this mainly for Megadeth, and this show definitely helped give me a greater appreciation for Rust in Peace. I've also seen them one other time, a year later in 2011, my first time going to Mayhem Fest, where they were on the main stage. Both shows took place during the time their lineup included Chris Broderick on guitar and Sean Drover on drums. Since Symphony of Destruction was such a favorite of mine in the first Guitar Hero, it's only natural that I'd have a similar connection to the band's 1992 follow-up to Rust in Peace, Countdown to Extinction. For as accessible as the songs are on this album compared to on Rust in Peace, it still has a lot of the trademark Megadeth characteristics, so it doesn't really feel like a departure or anything like that. My other favorite tracks from this album include Skin in My Teeth, Architecture of Aggression, Foreclosure of a Dream, Ashes in Your Mouth, and of course, Sweating Bullets! Both of those albums, in addition to 1994's Euthanasia and 1997's Cryptic Writings, which isn't an album I like as much, were made by what I, along with many others, consider to be the classic lineup of Megadeth. Dave Mustaine on vocals and guitar, Marty Friedman on lead guitar, David Ellefson on bass, and the late Nick Menza on drums. May God rest his soul. If there's one thing Megadeth is highly regarded for, it's having some exceptionally great lead guitarists, such as Chris Poland, Al Petrelli of Trans-Siberian Orchestra, the previously mentioned Chris Broderick, and even their current lead player Kiko Loureiro of the Brazilian power metal band Angra that I recommend checking out if you don't know them. Marty Friedman is very clearly my favorite guitarist that's ever been in Megadeth, as well as my favorite member of the classic lineup. He made such a great impression on me from those shreddy solos that I looked into his discography to find that he had a background in instrumental neoclassical metal, which you guys know is stuff I'm all over. He has a solo career he still maintains to this day. Dragon's Kiss is a killer album, and prior to joining Megadeth, he also had two other bands in the 80s, Hawaii and Cacophony. I've talked about Cacophony, the band he had with fellow neoclassical shredder Jason Becker in my favorite instrumental songs video, and I consider their album Speed Metal Symphony to be one of the best neoclassical metal albums ever. To me, this really speaks volumes as to why his contributions to Megadeth are as acclaimed as they are. I remember hearing a story from my YouTube daddy Coverkiller Nation once that Dimebag Darrell Abbott was actually originally considered to join Megadeth after the departure of Jeff Young in 1989. Pantera at the time were really beginning to break out of the underground with the final album in their glam era, the more aggressive power metal, which I always saw as the bridging gap between the glammy speed metal sound of their first three albums and the thrashy groove metal sound they would adopt shortly afterward. Dimebag was certainly turning some heads at the time, so it's not a wonder Mustaine & Co. would consider him for the position. However, they had already signed Nick Menza on to play drums, and Dimebag was very adamant about not joining this band without his brother Vinny because they were in this together. Learning about this intrigued me, not just because it was so touching knowing that Dime wanted to stick by his brother till the end, but because it gives you more of an appreciation for what Marty Friedman brought to the band. And it makes you think how Megadeth would have sounded with Dimebag playing those Rust in Peace solos, and if it was ultimately worth it that we got the Megadeth that we did with Friedman taking the job, in addition to getting the Pantera that we did. Obviously the answer is yes! Cowboys from Hell is my second favorite album of 1990 after all. They've also had some tight drummers as well. Aside from Nick Menza, my favorite drummer in Megadeth would definitely be the late Gar Samuelson, who played on the first two albums, 1985's Killin' Is My Business and Business Is Good, and 1986's Peace Sells But Who's Buyin'. These two albums are known for being a lot thrashier in a traditional sense, and a big part of what makes the songs on them so blistering and aggressive is Samuelson's drumming on songs like Last Rites Loved to Death, The Skull Beneath the Skin, Rattlehead, Mechanics, Wake Up Dead, The Conjuring, and Good Morning Black Friday. Sean Drover was also great behind the kit the two times I saw Megadeth, and when he and Chris Broderick left in 2014 to form their own band, Act of Defiance, another band that comes recommended, Megadeth even had Chris Adler, formerly of Lamb of God, one of my favorite drummers of all time, briefly filling in before their current drummer Dirk Verburen joined, I hope I didn't butcher that name, who actually came as a recommendation from Adler. The most consistent member of Megadeth, aside from Dave Mustaine, is bassist David Ellefson, the other Dave. Dave! I don't usually have a ton to say about the bassists in this series, but one thing I always appreciated about Ellefson is his contributions to the songwriting, the most prominent being the short track Dawn Patrol on Rust in Peace, which has nothing to do with the Night Ranger album of the same name, in addition to the funky Lucretia, which might or might not get its name from the funky song Lucretia McEvil by Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Of course, for as overrated as I kind of find the song, the intricate bass intro on Peace Sells is also definitely worth mentioning. The only other noteworthy Megadeth bassist I feel like mentioning is James Lomenzo. And yes, it is primarily because he played on two of my favorite Black Label Society albums, as well as of course being a part of the strongest contender for who I believe to be the most talented glam metal band ever, White Lion. Kind of funny considering this band is fronted by the guy that infamously referred to glam as LA Metal. When I got my ticket for that Slayer Megadeth co-headline, the show was originally supposed to take place on Valentine's Day in 2010, and I actually had plans to see it with a girl, if you can believe it. It would have been the greatest Valentine's Day of my life. But the tour ended up getting postponed to summer because Slayer's Tom Araya had suffered a back injury, and around the same time, David Ellefson had rejoined Megadeth. 2010 was certainly an interesting time, and after Ellefson left the band for the second time last year in light of some sketchy allegations, Lomenzo was brought back in to temporarily fill in before their new bassist gets announced. And I suppose this is as good a time as ever to segue into the part where we Zifuck the fuck. That was my Dave Mustaine impression. If there's anything you've noticed so far in this video, it's that Megadeth has had the most lineup changes out of everyone in the Big Four. But honestly, if there's anything else you might have picked up on throughout this video, despite how many lineup changes they've gone through, they've had some very good players. I'd even say this has made them the most interconnected band within the metal community out of the Big Four as well. In addition to that, I'd say that the lineup changes didn't really place much of a burden on Megadeth's sound. It's been mostly consistent throughout their career, which is more than I could say about a certain other band. While I don't really go out of my way to listen to much of Megadeth's albums past Euthanasia, I'd say albums like Endgame, not to be confused with Rise Against's album of the same name, The System Has Failed, United Abominations, and even Dystopia don't stray far from the sound we like hearing from them. Obviously, this isn't to say their sound is 100% consistent. A common talking point when putting Megadeth up against Metallica, which I'll talk more about later, is that Megadeth hasn't put out something as near universally disliked as Saint Anger, or as divisive as Load, Reload, or even the Black Album. But if Megadeth had an equivalent to any of those albums, the two that come readily to mind are of course 1999's Risk and 2013's Super Collider. Much like what Metallica tried to do, this was Mustaine's way of trying to do more commercial writing. I've also seen this kind of criticism given to Countdown to Extinction and even Euthanasia, but with those albums there's at least more of a punch to them. But that's really the most Megadeth has done as far as alienating their audience goes. As much as I don't care for Risk or Super Collider, it's not like they outright ruined the band as a whole. But let's be honest, the biggest target of criticism of Megadeth is Dave Mustaine himself, for multiple reasons. One of those reasons is his vocals. I will say that he's the worst vocalist of the big four, but I wouldn't go out of my way to say his voice is outright terrible. One other thing that's consistent with Megadeth's sound is Mustaine's recognizable snarl. He definitely has the kind of attitude you like seeing and hearing in a metal frontman, even if his voice might not be particularly amazing. But he's certainly a good guitarist, I don't think there's any denying that. Seeing the solo trade-off on Hangar 18 between him and Chris Broderick live more than convinced me of that, let alone the trade-off with Marty Friedman on the original recording. Even if you aren't the craziest about Mustaine's voice, like I've said about Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think the musicianship from him, as well as the rest of the band, does enough to elevate the quality of the songs. But that's nothing compared to the criticism of his character. One thing that's brought up about Dave Mustaine a lot is the fact that he's a born-again Christian. Yeah, the mean motherfucker you hear on albums like Peace Sells,
Loves Jesus.
and not the correct one. He even went as far as to at one point disallow the black metal band Rotting Christ to be a part of a build Megadeth was on, not just because of the reputation black metal has of being all about Satan and shit, but because of their name. Obviously, yeah, that's dumb, but I've never been the kind of person to judge someone over their religious or anti-religious views unless they use them as a means to belittle people and shove their views down everyone's throats. This also, of course, applies to his very disagreeable political beliefs. Like, how much of a conspirator do you have to be to not only be a birther, but also blame Barack Obama for the Aurora, Colorado shooting? Kinda like I said in my Green Day video, it shouldn't be that much of a surprise that he would have beliefs like this if you pay attention to what he says, even in songs like Peace Sells, or numerous tracks on Rust in Peace, such as Holy Wars being inspired by the Northern Ireland conflict, or the Troubles. United Abominations in particular is probably the album that's the most in your face about it. Not only that, but the title track on Endgame was even based around a film by Alex Breaking the Conditioning Gay Frogs Jones. Even looking at their album titles, Peace Sells But Who's Buying, The System Has Failed, United Abominations, Dystopia, you can tell there's a bit of a theme there. He's always kind of hinted at leaning conservative and having some conspiratorial beliefs that I very much don't agree with, even as someone that identifies as libertarian. It's interesting to note though that Dave doesn't actually identify as a Republican, but rather independent, and encourages thinking for yourself. Either way, I've always said in videos like my What's Wrong Withs on Green Day and Rage Against the Machine that if the music is good enough, it can make up for even the most disagreeable politically charged lyrics. Plus, as far as conservative rock musicians go, it's not like Mustaine's ever written cringe like what we've seen recently from guys like Kid Rock and Aaron Lewis of Stain. And this is coming from someone that doesn't go out of my way to dislike someone simply for being conservative, as evidenced by my Trapped video. But enough about politics, let's get to the last aspect of Dave Mustaine's attitude issues. If you've seen my Machine Gun Kelly video, I talked briefly about the beef between Megadeth and Metallica as an example of feuds between bands. Before Kirk Hammett was brought on board as Metallica's lead guitarist, Dave Mustaine was the original man for the job. He, along with James Hetfield, were among the first to respond to Lars Ulrich's advert for people to form a band with in 1981. He co-wrote about half the tracks on Kill 'Em All before he was fired for his drug and alcohol problem, in addition to attitude problems he was having with the other members. One can infer that this, plus all the lineup changes Megadeth went through, is an indicator that he's not the easiest to get along with. Not helping is that for years after the fact, this was a grudge that he just didn't want to let go of. But another way of looking at this is that this competition he was having with Metallica is what motivated him to make the best music he could and outdo his former band. He's even went on record saying, "After getting fired from Metallica, all I remember is that I wanted blood. Theirs. I wanted to be faster and heavier than them." I remember watching a video from a YouTuber called Desert Coyote 22 that puts this idea into perspective, such as his idea that Countdown to Extinction was Megadeth following in Metallica's footsteps and trying to write their own Black Album. Another aspect of the Metallica vs. Megadeth feud is of course the idea that Megadeth jacked riffs from Metallica on Killin' Is My Business, which even the title bears a resemblance to Kill 'Em All. I've seen this argument be made the other way around against Metallica more often, since I guess Mustaine was the primary writer, but for the purpose of this video, we'll focus on the opposite angle. The most prominent example of a similar sounding riff between these two bands is Mechanics being like Metallica's song The Four Horsemen on steroids. He does have a writer's credit on those songs, so it's not like anyone's denying his involvement with the writing on Kill 'Em All, let alone his involvement in Metallica. But the thing to understand is that when Mustaine wrote those riffs with Metallica, he had every intention of bringing them to life, as any riff writer would. He just had a different idea of what to do with them than Metallica did. I talked about this concept a good bit in my rip-offs video, but even if Mustaine did straight up rip off Metallica, he ultimately did something different with those riffs and came out with something new, and the same obviously applies the other way around. So I don't really see this as a problem, or an indication that Mustaine is so uncreative that he has to steal from other bands. And even if it was, it's not like this was a recurring habit of his on Megadeth's albums going forward. If I haven't made myself clear by now, I think the Metallica vs. Megadeth debate is annoying and silly. It's like, guys, they're both great bands who have done some great work, can't we all just get along? But that's really more of a qualm with the fandom, and I'm sure you know how I feel about acting like that's the band's faults. Did Dave do much to help that?
No.
Mustaine's grudge with Metallica was quite unbearable on his end, almost as bad as that of the fans. For as successful as Megadeth got, there was always a part of Dave Mustaine that didn't want to settle for being number 2. Now, why did I say almost as bad a little bit ago? Well, like I said in the Machine Gun Kelly video, as a way to differentiate MGK's rap-esque beef with Corey Taylor from other feuds between rock bands, Mustaine was at least able to bury the hatchet with Metallica in later years. This was of course indicated by Megadeth's participation in the 2010 Big Four show, as well as his congratulating Metallica when they got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and my favorite, when he wished James Hetfield a happy birthday in 2014, saying, "We changed the world, brother." They really did. For as much as I can get burnt out on this stuff pretty easily, thrash metal is arguably the most important metal subgenre because, as I said at the beginning of this video, it created a rift in the metal scene that was necessary for pushing the genre as a whole forward. And not only that, a lot of the tropes in metal that we see as normal today have their roots in thrash metal. Slayer and Anthrax, and even thrash metal bands outside the Big Four like Testament, Exodus, Creator, and Suicidal Tendencies do deserve credit for this, but at the forefront of it all was Metallica and Megadeth. And I believe Mustaine recognizing the shared impact both bands had on metal shows that for as much as they clashed, they both had a mutual respect for each other. And the fact that he was able to lay his grudge to rest shows a lot of character on his end, even if it did take a little over 2 decades for him to get to that point. Regardless, Megadeth is always going to be a band very near and dear to me. For as much as Dave Mustaine has done a number to make himself look like an insufferable jackass, for as much as Megadeth's discography, much like their lineup, has swerved around over the years, they'll always be one of the most iconic bands in metal with some of the genre's greatest albums under their belt. So now here's the part at the end of the video where I ask you, the viewer, what's wrong with Megadeth? Please be rational when leaving your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, take care, and have a nice day. I'm Shades, and I'll see you next time.